Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have a quick pre-look at the NFL 2023 preseason. It is finally here. We had the Hall of Fame game, which is technically preseason, but it's not really preseason. Now we have the actual preseason, which isn't much more exciting, but it's definitely a little more exciting, and it means we're one more week closer to week one of the regular season. So that is certainly more exciting.
Yep, the games don't count yet, but we're getting closer.
Certainly. And a lot of guys' jobs are on the line. So the plays definitely do count for a lot of these players who are going to be taking the field with pads finally. Mm-hmm. So before we jump into that, or getting a little ahead of myself, Cal and I are just going to talk about some of the favorite things that we want to look at and what we want to see from our teams, the Vikings and Packers, of course, respectfully, in the first preseason game this year. It's going to be pretty similar to what we talked about in the training camps, but we just wanted to get something out this week because we're going to really start diving deep into it next week when we actually have some games to talk about. Mm-hmm. But before we jump into that, a few bits of news here, starting off with 3 extensions. Malik Hooker and the Cowboys agreed to a 3-year, $24 million deal. Cameron Jordan and the Saints agreed to a 2-year deal worth $27.5 million, in which Cameron Jordan said he can now retire a Saint, which assumably means he's going to retire in 2 years. So that's interesting to call it out that far down the line, but to each their own.
We'll see how that goes, until another team starts calling, offering more money.
Yeah, it never fails. And then finally, the Bengals and linebacker Logan Wilson agreed to a 4-year, $37 million deal. So the Bengals locking in one of the better young linebackers in the league right now. Mm-hmm. And then finally, a whole flurry of signings that we'll run through quick, starting with the Chicago Bears signing Yannick Ngakoue to a 1-year deal worth $10.5 million, as well as former Packers tight end Mercedes Lewis to a 1-year deal as well. In the Jonathan Taylor uncertainty, the Colts signed running back Kenyon Drake, who was on the Baltimore Ravens last year. The Eagles signed 2 linebackers who were starters last year in Myles Jack and Zach Cunningham, both to 1-year deals. The Minnesota Vikings signed former first-round pick and Patriots wide receiver N'Keal Harry to a 1-year deal. John Johnson returns to the Rams on a 1-year deal after spending the last couple of years with the Browns. Mm-hmm. And finally, just recently, we are recording this on Monday night, and about half an hour ago, the Lions signed quarterback Teddy Bridgewater to a 1-year deal.
Yeah, and one of the most interesting signings there is the Yannick Ngakoue signing, because he gets 1 year, $10.5 million, which is just $500K shorter than what Saquon Barkley got. And I know that really does not look good about these whole running backs getting paid. Now, that's no shot at Yannick Ngakoue. He's a fine pass rusher, but he's just that. He's a designated pass rusher who's kind of getting on the back 9 of his prime. So, and whereas Saquon Barkley should be entering his prime and getting big bucks. I think it's just interesting that those contracts are very similar for 2 very different players. And the Mercedes Lewis signing, that makes him the longest tenured tight end in NFL history, breaking a tie with, I believe, Tony Gonzalez and Jason Witten for 18 seasons now. He'll be a tight end playing in the NFL. So good for Big Dog.
That is impressive to have your body hold up for that long playing in the NFL. Absolutely crazy. I'm really excited to see the Yannick Ngakoue signing by the Bears, actually, because they have Dominique Robinson, who's a very good up-and-coming pass rusher who was a rookie for them last year. And now they got a little bit of a veteran who has a very similar play style to what Robinson had to solidify that other side and kind of mentor Robinson. So $10.5 million is kind of a lot for a 1-year deal, especially, as Callan just mentioned, with Saquon only getting 11, but I think that could easily pay off for them. My most interesting signing out of this group is the Myles Jack and Zach Cunningham signing for the Eagles, because they pick up 2 guys who were starters last year for their teams, with Myles Jack starting in Pittsburgh and Zach Cunningham starting in Houston. So neither of those are star-studded defense by any means, but those are both guys who started on an NFL defense, which is something really good to say, and a lot of people can't say, and now they are both on the Eagles and both probably going to be starters for them after they lose TJ Edwards this offseason.
Yeah, it's similar to last year when they signed Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph to help solidify that defensive line. Now with the linebacker core now kind of the weak point in that defensive scheme, they signed these two veterans to help shore up that linebacking spot.
Yep, certainly. So now we will jump in to Cal and I's go-tos to watch for in our favorite team's first NFL preseason game of the 2023 season. I'll kick it off here with the Minnesota Vikings, and something that you probably won't expect me to say and something I would never say during the regular season, but I'm excited to see the Minnesota Vikings quarterback battle, the battle for the backup spot. Right now, Nick Mullins has kind of solidified himself in there. But I've heard that Jaren Hall, the rookie that we got out of BYU this year, has been absolutely killing it in camp. So if Nick Mullins puts the pads on and shows a sign of weakness, and Jaren Hall can go out there and absolutely ball out now that the pads are on, he could really make a running at that backup spot.
Yeah, I always liked Nick Mullins. I always thought that he fit well at the 49ers. He was another quarterback who proved you don't need to have a lot of quarterback talent to run that 49ers offense. But he was quite successful with them, if I remember. He wasn't, like over the top, successful, but he had a good run with them. And I always thought he played well.
No, he's certainly a perfect backup quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my turn?
Your turn.
Okay. For the Packers, for their preseason game, I'm looking to see also that backup quarterback spot and see who plays the most snaps, either it's Alex Magoo or Sean Clifford. And obviously it won't be Jordan Love getting that much snaps. I do believe that Jordan Love starts. I think he's going to play a series from what I've heard. I'm not positive on that, but I do believe he is going to play, which is unlike last year when Aaron Rodgers did not play. So it's interesting that our starter will be playing this year.
Yeah, it's really weird to see a starter play, even in a situation like Love, where he's borderline a rookie, considering he's never had some true play time. Even with that, it's kind of weird to see him get thrown into that, but we'll see how it goes for them. My number 2 thing to watch for the Minnesota Vikings game is something that we just talked about a little bit ago and something that happened with the Vikings very recently. How is N'Keal Harry going to fit into that wide receiver room? Now, he's almost just signed as a camp body, it would seem like, with where he was signed in the season and when he was signed. But I think that he actually has a chance to make a push. I'm not saying he's going to come in and be borderline leading or a number 2 wide receiver behind Justin Jefferson and leading everybody else who isn't named Justin Jefferson. I think that he could easily make a push for some play time and kind of solidify himself at that wide receiver 4 position on the depth chart right now. Because behind Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne, it's a complete toss-up back there with Jalen Reagor, Jalen Nailor, and now N'Keal Harry in the mix. So one of those guys are going to step up, and they're all going to get a lot of snaps in the preseason.
Yeah, the Vikings, they just really like collecting first-round wide receivers. They got 4 of them now, which I believe is almost a record. I think the Ravens, we talked about earlier this offseason, have the record. I believe they have 5 or 6 first-round wide receivers. So the Vikings and the Ravens are competing for that very ominous record of having the most first-round wide receivers.
Some teams in the NFL, the purple ones, the Ravens and the Vikings, they're hoarding first-round receivers like it's toilet paper during COVID. They're just going all out on it.
Yeah, it's quite the battle there for the first-round wide receivers. And moving on to the Packers' second point, I'm going to look to see who's starting at safety. Now, I talked about this in the training camp episode. We have quite the competition at our safety spots. Both the free safety and strong safety is up for grabs. And I always thought that Darnell Savage had one of those spots locked in. But in training camp, the starters have been Rudy Ford and Jonathan Owens. Darnell Savage has actually been running with the second team. So, that's interesting to see. I always thought that the Jonathan Owens was a very strong pickup. He was the 17-game starter for the Texans last year, and I just think he didn't get much flair because he played for the Texans. but he was a very solid starter and a very sure tackler. And I like him at strong safety. And Rudy Ford, he came in as a special teams esque player, and really has played his way into the starting role and has now got the starting job for now in training camp, at least, over Darnell Savage at that free safety spot. But we'll have to see who truly is at the lineup spot when the kickoff starts this Friday at 7.
Yeah, it's a fall from grace for Darnell Savage if he can't get himself back into that starting role, because he was not only a starter last year, but I thought played well enough as a starter. So if he comes in and gets beat out by a new guy and a rookie out of nowhere, that's got to light a fire under your ass, to say the least.
I think it should. So maybe it'll benefit, and we'll have 3 strong safeties, but
Well, going from one secondary to another, my final point to watch for the Minnesota Vikings is their cornerback battle. Now, of course, just like the wide receivers, with Justin Jefferson, Byron Murphy Jr. has locked in that CB1 position, but it is just an absolute toss-up outside of that for who's going to be CB2 through however many CBs we run, because it's just a battle right now. Of course, Andrew Booth Jr. has kind of been the front runner, or the idea of a front runner for that, but he's been dealing with a lot of injury problems all through camp, so that's really hurt his stock. Now we have Mekhi Blackman, the rookie that we just picked up this year, Caleb E. Evans, a rookie who has a very similar play style as Blackman, but we picked him up last year. And then now Jawan Williams, who is a guy that we just picked up this offseason from, I believe, the Cleveland Browns, who a lot of people are saying is a very under-the-wire, underrated signing for the Vikings. And apparently Jawan Williams has been balling out in camp and really pushing for that cornerback 2 position.
I think he was actually a Patriot. So
you are correct. He
coming
was a
from the
Patriot.
Belichick system, he's got to pick up something. He definitely would have benefited from having Belichick as a coach,
Yeah, they say that all of these guys who do all have a very physical play style have very much benefited from the Brian Flores defense. So that makes a lot of sense. So it'll be fun to see what they can do when the pads go on and the hits are for real now.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. And then for the final point for my Packers game, I'm going to be looking at what our rookies do. And I mean our first round pick, Lucas Van Ness, our second round picks, Jaden Reed, and the 2 tight ends, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. Now all 4 have been playing very well in training camp and have all had reps with not only the first team, but with not only the second team, but also the first team reps at times as well. They've used Jaden Reed as kind of that gadget player, similar to what the 49ers used Deebo Samuel as. So that'll be interesting to see. And then the tight ends have been making a very strong, very, very strong push to be starters this year in our offensive system.
The Tucker Kraft versus Luke Musgrave is my go-to battle for the Packers right now. That's going to be really interesting to watch, because now with Robert Tonyan leaving them this offseason, that tight end position is truly up for grabs.
It's
and
wide open.
Both of these guys are really young, really talented, and really have a chance to not only earn that starting spot, but truly thrive in that spot. And hell, when they get chances like that, sometimes you see rookies come out and be some of the best players in the league at their position.
Yeah.
It could be a situation similar to that.
One thing they've been showing is they can block. They've been really proving that they've been able to block very well in the training camp so far. So it's just a small sample size, but they didn't have to block very much in college, and being able to prove that they can block in the NFL, that's going to be huge if they can really pull it off.
Very much. Easily one of the hardest transitions from college to NFL is blocking for a tight end, I've heard. Okay, so that was what Cal and I are watching for in our team's preseason games. Just some quick heads up, the very first preseason game is Thursday night starting at 6 p.m. Central, with the Texans going to New England to take on the Patriots. The Vikings preseason game is that same night, Thursday night at 9 p.m. Central Time, with us heading to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. And the Packers' first preseason game, as Callan alluded to earlier, is Friday night at 6 p.m. Central, with the Packers heading to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. So we are finally in the thick of it now. It is getting real. Sorry if this episode was kind of similar to last week's, but we just wanted to get something out and talk about something, and this was a fun topic to talk about. I really enjoyed it.
Yep.
So thank you all so much for watching, and until next week, Don't forget
to eat the W.